The ending of this film was not written by John Hughes. The studio wanted something bigger. Chase and Ramis wrote a new one. Hughes watched his ending disappear from his own movie and made a decision that launched the most important directing career of the 1980s. That story is at number 1. And by the end of this video, you will understand exactly what one studio note accidentally gave American cinema. Think about every family road trip you ever took where everything went wrong. The wrong turns, the relatives who should have been avoided, the car that was already struggling before you left the driveway, the specific feeling of being trapped together, no exit, no escape, and having to find a way to laugh at it before it broke you. Clark Griswold did not invent that experience. John Hughes just recognized it from his own childhood and wrote it down, and what came out was one of the most quoted family comedies in American history. Number 10. This was John Hughes's real childhood. He published it in a magazine, then it became a film. The screenplay was written by John Hughes based on his short story Vacation 58, published in National Lampoon magazine in 1979. The original story is reportedly a fictionalized account of his own family's ill-fated trip to Disneyland when Hughes was a boy. Hughes was working at a Chicago advertising agency when he started writing for National Lampoon, submitting pieces between campaigns, building a parallel career out of the specific comedy of ordinary American family life gone completely wrong. The vacation his family actually took, the wrong turns, the impossible relatives, the relentless optimism of a father who refused to admit the trip was a disaster, all of it was in the original story. The film changed the destination to Wally World. The emotional truth was never changed at all. Every time Clark Griswold refuses to turn around, every time he insists this is going to be the greatest family vacation in human history despite all available evidence, that is John Hughes remembering a trip his father took him on, and meaning it as both a joke and a tribute simultaneously. And into this deeply personal story walked an actor who would make it his own in a way Hughes hadn't fully anticipated. Number 9. Anthony Michael Hall grew 3 inches during production. Different scenes, different heights. Anthony Michael Hall, who played Rusty Griswold, was going through puberty during shooting. He grew 3 inches throughout production and as a result is different heights throughout the film. If you watch Vacation carefully, and most people have seen it enough times to notice almost anything, Rusty Griswold is measurably different sizes in different scenes. Not a camera angle, not a lens difference, 3 actual inches of human growth distributed across a production schedule. Hall was 14 years old and his body was operating on its own timeline regardless of the shooting schedule. The continuity department could adjust for costume changes. They could not adjust for puberty. Rusty Griswold grew up during this film in the most literal sense possible, and every scene they filmed in the second half of production quietly reflected it. And then there was the incident with the dog, which was not invented. Before we keep going, how old were you the first time you watched this film? Just the number. Drop it in the comments, because most of us watched this with our families, which made certain scenes considerably more complicated than they needed to be. How old were you? Number 8, the dog tied to the bumper really happened. Ramis saw it himself. One of the particularly morbid gags in the film is when the Griswolds forget that their Aunt Edna's dog is still tied to the bumper of the Truckster as they drive away. Appearing on Late Night with David Letterman in 1983, Ramis told the host that the crew was staying at a hotel in Durango, Colorado, and saw a car begin to drive off with a dog still attached. A real car, a real dog, a real moment witnessed by the film's director while staying at a hotel during production. The gag that makes audiences laugh and wince simultaneously, the one that has been debated in living rooms for 40 years about whether it goes too far, was not invented by a comedy writer sitting at a desk. It was observed in a hotel parking lot in Colorado by the man who then put it in the film. Sometimes real life provides the joke so completely that all a director has to do is write it down and trust that if he found it funny in a parking lot, an audience will find it funny in a theater. And the car carrying all of this was itself one of the great design achievements of the decade. Number 7, 5 Trucksters were built. Hughes used the same paint on another film, It Lives Forever. There were 5 Wagon Queen family Trucksters used in rotation during production, allowing for each to be altered in various ways to account for the wear and tear the car endures throughout the Griswold's trip. Once he became a director, John Hughes would apply the same pea green paint and wood siding to what he called a Grand Detroit Farm & Country Turbo, the convertible sedan Steve Martin and John Candy get stuck with in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. 5 separate cars built to look identically terrible, each one progressively damaged as the production progressed, so the car's deterioration tracked the vacation's deterioration in real time, and then Hughes liked the aesthetic so much he brought it back. The specific shade of pea green that represents everything wrong with American automotive design in the early 1980s, that shade lives in 2 separate John Hughes films. The Truckster is not a joke. It is a recurring character, a monument to optimism in the face of poor engineering. Clark Griswold would have driven that car forever, and Hughes wanted to make sure you never forgot what it looked like. And the woman in the Ferrari alongside it had her own specific requirements. Number 6. Harold Ramis was embarrassed by his own film, said so on the DVD commentaries. In the film's DVD commentary, director Harold Ramis said he was worried the National Lampoon style of comedy may have had too much of an edge for his directorial style, and said he was particularly embarrassed by the scene in St. Louis, calling it the most politically incorrect sequence I've ever shot. A director going on record, on the official DVD release of his own film, to describe a scene he made as the most politically incorrect thing he ever put on camera. That combination of honesty and discomfort is very Harold Ramis. He made the film, he owned what was in it, he also refused to pretend it was something it wasn't. The National Lampoon comedy of the early 1980s operated in a register that the decade around it permitted, sometimes encouraged, and Ramis understood by the time he sat down to record a commentary exactly how that register had aged. He said so clearly. That kind of directorial honesty is rarer than it should be. And while Ramis was navigating the edge of what was acceptable, someone was quietly making her first film appearance. Number 5, Jane Krakowski, was 14 years old, playing a character who gives someone a joint. The redneck cousin girl who gives the daughter the joint is Jane Krakowski from the hit TV show Ally McBeal, most recently seen as the fabulous Jenna on 30 Rock. 14 years old, her first significant film role, playing a character whose contribution to the story is handing a controlled substance to a teenager while leaning against a fence in rural America. Krakowski went on to build one of the most distinguished television comedy careers of the next 3 decades. Emmy nominations, Tony Awards, beloved characters in multiple long-running series. She started here, in Colorado, as a redneck cousin at 14. Nobody in that scene knew they were looking at a future Tony Award winner. They were just trying to get the shot before the light changed. And while the cast was being assembled, the script itself was changing in ways the writer was not entirely happy about. Number 4, Chase and Ramis rewrote Hughes's script. Hughes was not pleased. He directed his next film himself. Director Harold Ramis and Chase retooled the script after they felt Hughes had taken the premise as far as he could. Ramis would later say that Hughes was probably a little upset over having his material reworked. I saw John quoted in an interview saying he was going to start directing his own movies, Ramis said, because he was tired of seeing his scripts ruined by other directors. Hughes wrote and directed 16 Candles in 1984. The writer of the most successful road comedy in years watched the director and the star rewrite his material and responded by deciding he would never be in that position again. 16 Candles, The Breakfast Club, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, Home Alone. All of it, the entire run of the most commercially successful period in American comedy screenwriting, beginning from the specific frustration of watching someone else change your words. Hughes didn't complain publicly, he just went and directed. The best revenge in Hollywood is a body of work. And the original ending he wrote, the one that was changed, is the story that changes everything. Number 3, Christie Brinkley had specific contractual requirements. Every shot was negotiated. Christie Brinkley arrived on the vacation set at the absolute peak of her Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue fame, the most recognizable face in American fashion at that precise moment. Her casting was designed to make Clark's fantasy feel genuinely aspirational. She was contractually specific about how she would be filmed, which angles, which lighting conditions, how long she would be required on set each day. The production accommodated every requirement because the alternative was finding someone else who could make the audience understand immediately and completely why a reasonable man in a station wagon might temporarily lose his mind. Brinkley has said the role was fun precisely because it required almost nothing of her except presence. She drove a Ferrari around Chevy Chase for a few days. She laughed. The camera filmed it. And the fantasy sequence became one of the film's most quoted moments because Brinkley understood instinctively what the scene was and played it with exactly the right amount of self-awareness. And the car she was driving was parked next to one of the great design disasters in cinema history. Number 2, the Truckster appeared in Married with Children's opening credits. Nobody planned it. In the beginning of the movie, when the Griswold set off, you get an aerial view of the station wagon on the freeway in Chicago. In the opening credits of the TV show Married with Children, you see the same freeway with the Griswold's family Truckster taking the exit ramp. It seems that the Married with Children producers used that scene as part of their intro credits. The same footage, the same pea green car, the same exit ramp. A shot from a 1983 film about the ideal American family vacation quietly became part of the opening credits of a show about the specific opposite of an ideal American family. Nobody at Fox called Warner Brother, nobody asked permission. Someone cut together the Married with Children opening, found this aerial shot of a station wagon on a Chicago freeway and used it. The Griswold's car drove off into American television and kept going. Clark would have appreciated the mileage. And the ending that everyone remembers, the breakdown, the BB gun, the forced reopening of Wally World, was not John Hughes's ending at all. Number 1, Hughes wrote a different ending. The studio changed it. Hughes became a director. Everything followed. In Hughes's original script, Clark snaps upon arriving at Wally World only to learn the park is closed, and the Griswolds drive home. That was the ending. The vacation fails completely. Clark drives everyone home. The punchline is the futility. It is honest, and it is dark, and it is exactly the kind of ending a writer puts on a story about a man whose optimism is stronger than reality. The studio wanted more. The final climax, Clark pulling a BB gun, holding the park manager hostage, forcing the reopening of Wally World, was written by Chase and Ramis to give the film a bigger payoff. Hughes watched his quiet, honest ending get replaced with a hostage situation, and he made a decision. He would direct his own material from that point forward. Nobody would change his endings again. Hughes wrote and directed 16 Candles in 1984, then The Breakfast Club, then Ferris Bueller's Day Off, then Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, then She's Having a Baby, then Home Alone. One studio note, one rewritten ending, one writer's decision to become a director because he was tired of watching other people decide how his stories ended. Clark Griswold drove the Truckster into Wally World waving a BB gun. John Hughes drove himself into a director's chair. And every film that followed, every film that defined the decade, every character that lived in your chest for 40 years, exists because a studio executive asked for a bigger climax and got considerably more than they bargained for. Tell us in the comments, what is the first vacation memory that comes back? The Truckster, Aunt Edna, the Moose Cup, Cousin Eddie in the bathrobe, or just the feeling of watching Clark refuse to give up when every reasonable person would have turned around 3 states ago? Write it down.